Well, Dominic joins us now from Minab in Iran. Thank you so much for being with us, Dominic. An extraordinary piece of reporting. How was it, how is it being at the site of this atrocity?
Well, Sophie, we saw the videos at the start of the war, and I think it was clearly obvious something very wrong had happened here right at the beginning of the conflict. But it's one thing to see those videos, and as we all know, when you actually come to where something terrible happened, it's a very different feeling. You know, the enormity of what happened here hits you, and the reality hits you. And you know, I'm standing in the assembly hall, the entrance hall of this school. Just almost 3 months ago, it was the first day of the school week. It was just after 11 o'clock when the missiles struck. And this was a school full of school children and their teachers, the girls upstairs, the boys downstairs, and then at least 2 cruise missiles. So missiles, advanced weapons of war designed to take out military bunkers or sink battleships, flew into a primary school. You know, and that's the crater that one of them caused, and you know, it was clearly targeted, the school, right in the middle of the building. And obviously then what followed was a scene of unspeakable carnage. We heard from Fazl there, who was one of the first people to come here, and he described how they literally picked through the body parts of children. This whole area was covered with them, and a lot of the girls and boys were crushed when the building over here collapsed on top of them. And then we've been listening to the testimony of parents, of teachers, of children in the last few days about the 3 months since. They've spoken with an intensity and a kind of quiet dignity, which is really humbling to listen to. And their courage is extraordinary of what they went through that day. And I think the point to make is, you know, their children died in the most horrendous of ways. Khadija, who was the woman by the graveside there we heard from, whose son would have turned 10 a few days ago, and you know, they held a birthday party for him at that graveside. Interviewed her yesterday, and she spoke for at least 2 hours, tears rolling down her cheeks for most of that time, and she described how all that was left of her son was a piece of torso and a bit of his arm that was identified, and they had to bury that. And that was the case, I think, for many of the parents here. So, you know, what they've been through is unimaginable, and they have somehow found the courage to deal with that and talk to us and people coming here, you know, beginning to come here to tell the story. And for them, there's a real imperative here to get the story out, but also they want to have answers, and they want to hear and know that justice is going to be done. And I think there's a contrast really to be made between their extraordinary courage and what the Trump administration has been doing ever since, because this is almost certainly the work of the US military. It had been bombing a number of targets in the area, some of them military. This was clearly marked as a school, had been for 10 years, clearly marked on maps, and yet it was still hit, and the parts of the missiles are clearly American-made Tomahawk missiles. All the administration has said since is that a preliminary report has been leaked, so it's not openly admitted this, but it was almost certainly the work of the US military. But all the administration is saying publicly and officially is they're investigating this, which is in stark contrast with what they've done with previous mass casualty incidents in Iraq and Afghanistan, where they fairly quickly said, yes, we did this, but we're investigating this. They've not really found the courage to do that yet with this, if they were responsible. And that has, I think it's fair to say, compounded the grief of the people here, but also led to an enormous amount of conspiracy theories and speculation as to why this happened. So, you know, it's essential for the Americans to say, if they were responsible, that they were, and then try and work out why it happened, not least because that would then prevent, we would hope, something similar happening again if the war starts up again.
I mean, Dominic, I have to say, to talk more broadly about the war after this feels insignificant, but since you ended on it, I do just want to get your take of the extent to which news of we will be attacking again, we won't be attacking again, true social type posts kind of reaches the people there. It's not really about whether it reaches the regime or not, but reaches the people there in Iran on a daily basis and how they react to that.
Yeah, you're right, Wilf. I mean, in some sense, a kind of, you know, this is a very much a human story, and the geopolitics is separate to it. Except for this, I think. You know, we're pretty close to the Strait of Hormuz here, and if the war starts again and the drumbeat of war seems to be getting louder, particularly from Washington, but also from Israel. If it starts again, and obviously people here are very worried about that, and they're fearful of it, and the information they get is certainly controlled by the government. They've not had free, unfettered access to the internet for months now, not since the beginning of the war. But obviously they are getting the version of events that state TV and the government is giving them, and they are clearly saying there is the risk of their aggressors attacking Iran again. And that fear of this happening elsewhere is obviously very real. And, we've heard from whistleblowers in America who have said that units set up in the Pentagon to prevent exactly this kind of thing happening, mass casualty events in the wake of what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, have been gutted, people on those units have been fired, 90% of them have been let go. And I think the fear is that is what led to this. This was a school, it was clearly marked, as I say, it was on maps. This should not have happened unless it was deliberate, which isn't really the way the US military operates, obviously. So, the concern, I think, is that the Americans are fobbing off the people of Minab by just saying it's being investigated. It's not clear to what extent it actually is being investigated. And it's really not clear what lessons are being learned from this. And I think, obviously, that is the fear for people here, but also across the rest of Iran, that if the war starts up, then there is the much greater risk of lots of other Minabs if the Americans haven't learned from what appears to have been a disastrous targeting mistake here.
Dominic, thank you so much for the reporting you've done. Dominic Waghorn there for us, reporting from Iran.